Welcome to the Encore Audio Archives YouTube channel. I'm Taper Dave, and this is my channel. I've uploaded hundreds of talks here that I've recorded at meetings in West LA, and I've also recorded conventions starting in 2013. I've got a bunch of those up. And Walt and Mary Murray, the original owners of Encore Audio Archives, started the company in the 80s, and Walt recorded Joe and Charlie's and a bunch of stuff down in Vista, California. My sobriety date is June 20th of 1994. I hope you find something you like, so please like and subscribe to my channel and comment down below. If you want to hear something that I don't have or that you don't see, I'll see that I get it. Anyways, take care and have a great day if you want to.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Hi everybody, I'm Terry, an alcoholic. Wow, this is really intimate. Should we all hold hands and sing Kumbaya or something? It's very nice. It's very nice. Really glad and grateful like anything to be here tonight. I want to thank Don for asking me to come and to share tonight. Always glad and always grateful to be in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Alcoholics were the only people that I hung out with when I was drinking and using, and now they're the only people I hang out with now that I'm sober. So it's just always a pleasure to be in your company. And I have absolutely no idea what I'm going to say, which is kind of nice. We'll see what happens, you know. Happy birthday, by the way, to Jean. Congratulations. And Chris did a wonderful job as well. Thank you, wherever you are. There you are. Thank you. Where to begin? God, I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. That's a good place to begin. Sometimes I say that's why I'm an alcoholic, but my father was a police captain, and my mother was a drinker, Irish Catholic drinker. Her last name was Ryan. My father was very rigid, very controlling, very by the book, stiff collar, by the rules, you know, policeman. And my mother just liked to party. Just like to have fun. And it always included alcohol, always. And growing up, I looked my father, you know, rigid and tense, you know, tense. And Mom, you know, let's party and have some fun, you know. So, you know, where was I going to go? You know, it wasn't really a choice. It wasn't really a choice, you know. And my mom used to have women's nights at her house when she had a women's group, and she would bring the girls. She always called them girls. She'd bring the girls over, and my Aunt Tilly was like 92 years old, and they'd pick up my Aunt Tilly, and she would make a batch of Manhattans that would stand you right on your ear, you know. They had to have Aunt Tilly's Manhattans, you know, so Aunt Tilly would come on over and sit in her rocker, and everybody would proceed to just get ossified, you know, and have a lot of fun. And my brother, I have an identical twin brother, we would get up there and sing, you know, because we were both in the choir at school, so we would sing for them and entertain them. And my older brother would get drunk and do a karate dance and rip his shirt off, and we'd all have a great time, you know. We'd always wind up carrying them out, always. Most of the girls, you know. There was one girl there named Stella who didn't drink. And I remember my mom and some of the other women there would always say, well, Stella's alcoholic. She said, hey, she doesn't drink. And she was always welcome at the you know, the groups, but there was always kind of like a secret little thing that Stella was a little bit different. She didn't drink, you know. So I grew up in that kind of an atmosphere, you know, where drinking was very acceptable. As a matter of fact, it was really encouraged. And at the end, when all the girls, you know, were carried out, I would go around and pick out the cherries in all their drinks and get that really warm, wonderful glow from those Manhattans and just say, whew, I could really enjoy this, you know. My reaction to alcohol was always very different from the people around me. You know, I as a teenager, you know, as a weekend warrior, you know, I would drink, and every time I ever drank, I got drunk. The first time I drank, it was in Februayr schoolyard. I drank beer, and then as soon as the beer was gone, I went out for Canadian Club. And this was the first time I drank the whole bottle of Canadian Club, threw up, got drunk, passed out, woke up and said, let's do it again. Let's do it again. Because inside where I live, okay, inside my guts where I live, okay, I was filled with tenseness and irritability and fear, so much fear, just so much fear. Being brought up in Brooklyn, hip, slick, and cool, taps on the shoes, had to turn up the collar, smoke cigarettes, use four-letter words, but inside scared to death, that somebody would discover I was a fraud, that I really wasn't a tough guy. You know what I mean? I really wasn't a tough guy. Mostly, I was scared to death to fight. Sometimes when I got cornered, I'd go bananas, and they call that, fighting, But more than anything, they just knew that if they cornered me, that I was crazy, But it was only fear. It wasn't courage, it wasn't courage, And so, mostly people just left me around and left me alone, and I learned to hang out with the tough guys, the real tough guys, And that's what I did growing up. But when I drank, all the fear, all the tenseness, all the irritability, all the discontent, all just kind of went away, just kind of soothed out right across the board. And I just went, oh man, it was just such a relief to finally find, the answer to the, I truly had a spiritual awakening. Alcohol really did for me what I couldn't do for myself. And it's ironic that they call it spirits, because I had a spiritual awakening, And I knew that this was my solution from now on. I knew, this is it, alcohol. And then later on came drugs, but alcohol was really my solution. I grew up in the 60s, so, there was a lot of drugs going around too, but always my number one love was always alcohol. I always went. I'd sneak away, from my hippie friends, because they thought that, people who drank alcohol, weren't hip or weren't cool or anything like that. They just thought that was the older generation's, game, So I would say, yeah, it's the older generation's game, and then I would secretly sneak off to Sloppy Joe's or our place and get drunk, It always put me where I needed to be, just at home. It put me at a place where I felt at home and comfortable in my own skin, And in the doctor's opinion, in the big book, it talks about that, that we experience a sense of ease and comfort by taking a few drinks, by taking a few drinks. So, what do I do now when I come to Alcoholics Anonymous? How do I get that sense of ease and comfort without the drinks, And I'll talk about that a little bit later, but, for me, really, it's by joining you in these rooms, and it's by actually, working the steps, and being of service. And Chris, you alluded to that. As far as being of service, anyway, this is a progressive disease, and I didn't even know I had a disease. I just thought that I knew I had an abnormal reaction to alcohol, because I would call my friend Franny Daniti up and I'd say, it's Friday night, you ready to go? You ready to get, the booze and go to the dance, Because forget about the dances. I was like this kid, I looked like Dennis the Menace, And I'd go to these dances and I would just freeze in fear of asking a girl to dance. Free. There was no way I could ask. And if I did, I would just I'd move like... But if I drank a half a pint of Old Mr. Boston's gin before I hit that gym, I jumped into the gym and did a split right in the middle and say, who wants to dance with me? It was like, boom, an amazing transformation. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. It was just amazing, And it seemed like I could tell the jokes, I can relax. I had that sense of ease and comfort enough, and confidence. It gave me confidence in myself where I felt equal to or better than most of the other guys around, Because when I wasn't drinking, I always felt less than, or better than, but mostly less than. Mostly like I wasn't enough. And enough what? Enough of everything. Really, enough of everything. Donnie Hummel he was the best looking guy in the whole crowd, so I wasn't as good looking enough as Donnie, right? George Marchetti had the money, so I wasn't rich enough as George. So I was always comparing my insides to their outsides and always coming up under the heap, always coming up short. But when I drank, then it didn't matter. I was as good looking as Donnie, maybe even better. You know what I mean? Money was a materialistic game anyway. Remember, it was the 60s, So I could I could dance, I can walk the walk and dance and be hip, slick, and cool, put taps on the shoes and just really feel like I fit. Finally, the first time in my whole life, I feel like, yeah, this is it, So you give alcohol to a guy like me, and guess what? Here I am in Alcoholics Anonymous, I mean, this was such a solution for me that I was rejoicing, and there was no way that I wasn't going to drink as much as I could, as often as I could, because it did for me. It gave me that. I don't know why people drink socially. I mean, I read about it. In the big book, it says that, it helps them become socially lubricated. I mean, well, I was lubricated. They mop me up off of Big Ed's every single night. But, I don't understand. I don't understand. I mean, if I was thirsty, I would drink a 7-Up or an iced tea. I don't understand. Why would people drink a beer if they're not going to get drunk? I still don't really understand that, Have an iced tea, for God's sakes, Throw that beer out if you're not going to get drunk. Don't waste it, I could never understand that. And I still have difficulty with it, But apparently it happens all around us, And God bless them, God bless them. I said I have a brother, an identical twin brother, and he is also in Alcoholics Anonymous. He's sober like 12 years or 13 years or something like that. And I got sober before him. I have a younger brother in Narcotics Anonymous. I have a sister in Overeaters Anonymous. So there's only like 2 kind of people in my entire family, those in 12-step programs and those that need to be, My older brother drank a lot. Now, I don't know whether he's alcoholic, but man, if he ain't, he's as close as he can get, But he manages somehow. He manages somehow, Sometimes that invisible line is a little bit, I mean, I blew across that invisible line at 13 years old, But apparently he's been trying to walk that thin line there, Am I not, And my brother Billy's a trip. I mean, he's quite a bit older. He's 9 years older than I am. And he comes from the John Wayne generation. The John Wayne generation that was like, we have a problem, you know what I mean? We go back, we think. See, that's my problem. But we think about the solution, and then we take the hill, and victory is ours. Right? See, the only problem with that for me is no matter what solutions I came up with, I kept winding up in the toilet. Every time I ever drank alcohol, even though I would say to myself, this time I'm going to a different bar. Okay, I'm not going with those lower companions like last week. This time I'm going with these higher companions. And this time, this time it's going to be different. It's certainly going to be different this time, And it never was. And isn't that the amazing thing about this disease, isn't it? It just blows my mind that this happened year after year after year. And I went out like regularly, a couple of times a week, at least once a week, a couple of times a week, And this time I'm only going to shoot some pool, I'm only going to have a couple of beers, And every time I ever went out, it was never different. I always got drunk, and the horror stories. I crashed my car into MGM Wall. And I had 2 hitchhikers in the back that I picked up at Ships, which is a diner down. I don't even know who they were, but they had back time. Hey, get in the car. And I hit the wall, and I turned around. All I saw was the hood of my car against the windshield. I turned around and I said, this is the last stop. And I got out. I left the car and them there in the car, because I knew that Culver City knew me on a first-name basis, Culver City Police Department. They were picking me up for public intoxication, and they were waiting outside Big Ed's for me on a regular basis. Big Ed's was an interesting place. I don't know if you know Big Ed's, but Big Ed's was the bar on Washington in Culver City. And it's the bar that is featured in the movie Barfly. A real class place, this place. Wonderful. Really nice. But Big Ed's was an interesting place because it had an incline. Now going in, I was usually fairly sober, so I would see the incline, and they had these like saloon doors where you just push the doors open and walk in, you know. But coming out, I never remembered the incline. Never remembered it. And always wound up, you know, road rash on my face or in the arms. Sometimes the police would wait for me right there. You just wait for whoever barrels out of Big Ed's, you know. And upstairs was the old Adams Hotel, and, you know, all of us used to go up there and smoke dope and throw people out windows and stuff. Oh, God. This disease, I didn't understand that I even had a disease. I thought that this is just what's happening to me. I thought that I was, you know, little by little, you know, being arrested and my wife, you know, throwing me out and, you know, just me robbing her purse because I had no money, and I was in the, you know, in those frenzies in the morning where I had to have a drink. There was just no way I couldn't. And I'm a shaker, you know, I'm a shaker. So I would wake up and shaking, and I had to have a drink, and I had no more money, and I would steal from her. She'd throw me out, and you know, it got to a point where I was like, you know, going to the recess room at 5:45 in the morning. Recess room was down the street from Big Ed's, and the bartender would set me up with beer until his regulars would come in, and then he'd ask me to go. You know, and when you get 86, or when you get asked to go out of the recess room, you're in tough shape, you know. It's almost like everybody around me realized that I had a serious problem, except me, you know. I mean, I couldn't really find any solution to it. It was almost like I was caught up in a whirlwind going down, you know what I mean? And my best thinking couldn't come up with a solution on how to stop it, because I'm an alcoholic of the hopeless variety, and I'm going to drink until there's no more left, and I mean none, you know, or something else is going to happen. And I kept going back, like, remember my older brother, you know, the John Wayne generation, go back and think of a solution. And I tell you, you know, I thought of, okay, here's the deal. This vodka has really got to go, you know. And you know what else, man, is when I'm smoking pot, when I smoke dope and I drink, I spin out. So it's the dope, it's the pot. And that's what makes me not an addict, by the way. I just gave up the dope. You know, if it came down to like the drinking or the dope, forget the dope, man. You know, I thought that's it. It's the dope. So goodbye. I gave that up like that. Just boom, it was gone. Okay, and I smoked dope for a long, long, long time. You know, I tried all the different arrangements. You know, all the different, I'll try this and that, this and that. It always wound up in the exact same place in Culver City drunk tank, waking up, oh God, how did I get here again? Or even at the bar, you know, just experiencing the same thing year after year after year. The pitiful and incomprehensible demoralization of having an addiction, and that's the nature of the addiction, is doing it again and again and again, even against your will. This time, I'm not going to do it. You know, me and my friend Will, you know, Willpower? Me and my friend Will, we'd walk arm in arm into Big Ed's, kick the door open. All right, we're just going to have two, you know? 200, you know? I never had two of anything, you know? And, you know, it got to the point where there was, well, you know, I drank till the wheels fell off, till there was no more left, until I couldn't do it anymore. You know, just couldn't do it anymore. And I was sneaking out one day, and a friend of mine, who was around AA, but not really a member, but he was going at that time. He said, you know, you don't have to live like this. There is a solution, he said to me. I didn't know what he meant, and I drank that day. But a few days later, him and a really good friend of mine, Pat Keneally, who was a paratrooper in Vietnam, took me to my first AA meeting. And, you know, I thought, that's it, the last house on the block. Here I am in AA, you know? It's like, oh, my God, what has happened, you know? I mean, AA was a huge step up for a guy like me, you know, from where I had been lately, you know? And I had run out of ideas, run out. There was no other place for me to go. Nobody wanted me around. They were 86ing me everywhere, you know? And my life had got to a point where that was it. You know, the end of the road, the last house on the block, and that was it, you know. And I'll tell you, you know, I am so grateful for that I didn't just waltz in after my first 502. that I didn't just like waltz in, with a high bottom. I kind of felt like I got sober my last drink was on Christmas Day, okay? 1981. I got sober on Christmas. I got sober the day after Christmas. And people ask me, especially when I take a birthday the day after Christmas, they say, couldn't you make it to New Year's, And what I say is that I kind of hit bottom literally like 5 years before I got in, but certainly after Halloween, I just kind of scraped along, and there was no way I could continue, I mean, when you're done, you're done. Isn't that true? I mean, God knows when you're done, And, I hope to God I am done, Hope to God I'm done. And I didn't know where to go, so they brought me to Alcoholics Anonymous. I sat in the back. They gave me some coffee. And I can't tell you what was said. It was at the Marina Center. And I couldn't tell you what was said. But at the end of the meeting, everybody got up, and there were these two guys next to me. And I swear to God, these guys looked like they were 6'9" or 7 foot. They were big. They seemed big, maybe because I was like, shaking and sweating and sick on the inside and just like, ready, and desperate, man. I mean, desperate for a solution, It wasn't like I had to have this thing, I had to have this thing. So these guys grabbed my hand at the Lord's Prayer, and I really got the message of Alcoholics Anonymous from that the more I shook, I was kind of embarrassed because I was shaking. They grabbed my hand, and I got the very clear message what Alcoholics Anonymous really is. And what it is that alone I am a drunk in the streets. But if I grab these guys' hands, okay, and go to these meetings and take some direction, there's a chance for a guy like me to stay sober one day at a time. And they told me, keep coming back. And I went, yeah, where does a guy like me go unless I can keep coming back to Alcoholics Anonymous, And I came back. And what I wanted to do was just hang out with you guys. I really wanted to just like, hey, these are pretty, hip-slicking cool kind of, people that don't drink. All my friends were drinking and using. So all I really wanted to do was hang out. And they gave me a commitment. I was bringing the donuts on Tuesday and lighting candles on Friday. So I went Tuesdays and Fridays, right? And what I like to say is this was a period that I call my osmosis period, okay? Because what I really tried to do was just come in and sit my ass in the seat and absorb as much of the program as I could through osmosis, okay? Now, it's wonderful, I saw here the triangle, the AA triangle in the front here. It's nice to see again, it really is. And on one side of the triangle, right, is unity. And unity is actually the fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's what we're doing here tonight. We're meeting, we're gathering together, we're sharing our experience, strength, and hope and love with one another, And that's wonderful, and that's one side of the program. The other side is recovery, the other side of the triangle, okay, which in my opinion is the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. It's actually the steps, okay? And the other side is service, okay? Now, I was working 1/3 of the program through osmosis and expecting 100% of the results. And I want to tell you, it didn't work for long. It worked for a while. It worked for a few months, and then I would drink, And I got 5 months one time, and I thought, my best thinking said, it's Christmas. I'm going to fly back to New York with my Irish Catholic family and observe Christmas with them and stay sober. I had 5 months of sobriety. I hadn't worked one step, really. I mean, really worked any steps, So I did, and I lasted maybe 20 seconds, And I came back, and I didn't really know what to do, but I knew that I was, I knew that I was desperate, and it was a gift for me. It was a gift to be that desperate, because through the desperation came willingness. And if you told me, to push a peanut across the Pulver Boulevard with my nose, man, I am on it. I'm on it. Whatever it took. If whatever it took, because I was out of ideas, and I was in AA and still drinking, not really understanding, that I was not working the entire program. I believe, my opinion is that the program of Alcoholics Anonymous needs to be worked from all sides, with a balance of coming to meetings, working the steps, and being of service, to God and to our fellows, And, so many times these days, things become so good, I don't know what to do. It's so great, that I get a little complacent and I lose that sense of desperation that I had when I came in. And what I do basically is I need to get next to somebody who has just a few hours or a couple of days, go down to the Wine Guard Center and snuggle up next to one of those guys down there, and see that desperation in their eyes, recognize it because it speaks to my soul. I don't know about you, but it speaks to me, and I find God right there in our midst. It speaks right to my heart and right to my guts. It says, here's a man just like me, and I've been blessed with sobriety. I've been given this gift, right? And this guy has to have this thing. This is not like, oh, it would be nice, He's got to have it or he's going out, And, we all know what the problem is, but at that point, we have the solution and we carry the message. And I can carry the message, I've been blessed with this, all my life I've been really thinking about, what the hell am I doing here on this place, this planet Earth? What good am I? Taking up space, breathing, drinking, or drunk, dealing dope. What the hell good am I? What good am I doing, And finally, at 31 years old, and going through all the things, what I described before, and all the pitiful and incomprehensible demoralizations of all those things, to get to a point where now I have a purpose, finally, and thank you, God, I got a purpose now. And I would have never guessed it, And my purpose in life would be to reach out to another alcoholic, another addict, and say, hey, you know what? I was just where you are, not long ago. Only by the grace of God can I offer you a solution, And if that person is willing and desperate enough, he'll say yes, because I have to have this thing, And man, what a miracle that is. And it's given me purpose and a feeling of usefulness in my life. I work, I have a job, I do it, God is my employer, yeah, But really, my purpose is, when it really boils down to it, I really believe that I'm here to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. And all those situations that happen at Big Ed's and the Sloppy Joe's and the recess room, all that stuff, all that like being dragged across all of that, all that pain and all that stuff, has all been put to a purpose now, And doesn't the big book say that, our greatest liabilities turn into our best assets, our highest assets, because we have been there. God loved, the counseling community and all the PhDs and all this, I have a lot of respect for them, but we are uniquely qualified, really, to carry the message of Alcoholics Anonymous. We're uniquely qualified, right? That kind of bond that we hit with another drunk or another addict is like no person who doesn't have the experience can actually get that kind of connection. Because I've seen it and I've experienced it. Sure, they have the book knowledge, the clinical thing, yes, but we have experienced, the streets. We've experienced, the gutter and that kind of degradation. And we also, at this point, have experienced the incredible gift of sobriety. My sponsor used to say, Terry, when you drink and use, you deal yourself right out of the card game of life. Say life is a card game. You deal yourself right out. You throw your own cards in and say, I'm out, which is really true. When I drink, I wasn't the kind of person that would go to work. Why work? I'm drunk. I'm drinking. I didn't show up at home. I didn't show up at work. I didn't show up, period. I dealt myself right out of the game. But he said, if you're clean and sober, you're in the game. You're in the game. Now, there may be days when you get dealt jokers, or really bad cards, but that's life. Because there's going to be other days when you get dealt straight aces right up. And there's nothing you could do wrong on a day like that. And there's so much joy and so much happiness, life happens on life's terms. There's no way around that, But when life isn't like going my way, I got places to go. I can come to this room, because my brand of insanity. And what ticks between these ears. And it's scary. Really, it's scary sometimes. Isn't it? Oh, my God, you should know. If you knew, you probably wouldn't be sitting out there. This person I know really well, she gave me a button, And on the button it says, does the noise in my head bother you? And you know, I wear it out there, and they go, what does that mean? And like that, you know. But I wear it in here, and you all go, oh, right, yeah. Because you know my brand of insanity, you know. Clearly nuts. I'm clearly nuts. You know, my thinking is amazing. You know, I really have to beware and very vigilant of it, you know. You know, I'm at the grocery line, and I'm in the line, you know, where it's 10 items or less, and this lady has 11 items, you know. And then I start thinking, you know, is a six-pack 6 items or is it 1, you know? And I got to call the manager over, you know, and this lady has 11, you know. I mean, I got to go to God on this stuff. Where the hell else am I going to go? I mean, where can I go in that moment, you know? Because my program really has to be about the moment, you know? It has to be about that particular instant, you know, where I'm about to explode because this poor lady, you know, has 11 items rather than 10, you know? You know, so I really have to go to God, you know. There's no other place, you know. And so, you know, my thinking is, like, when I used to drink, I would get a thought on a hot August day. You know, a couple of beers would be good. But right behind the thought, really, was this, like, roaring obsession right behind it. Almost like simultaneous. The thought, boom, the obsession was on me, and pretty soon I'm drinking, okay? Pretty soon I'm drinking. But what happens now is on a hot August day, the thought comes. The thought comes. A couple of beers on it would be nice. And now it's just like this weak, limp, shallow thought. It's like, oh yeah, right. Because there's no obsession anymore. The obsession to drink literally has been lifted from me by the grace of God for 18 years. I haven't had that. And I want to tell you tonight, if I walk out that door and got obsessed to drink, I would drink. I don't have the power to fight obsession. And I never have. I never have, you know. That obsession just takes me and does what it wants with me, you know. But the obsession to drink and use has been lifted, you know, and that's miraculous for a guy like me because all my whole life was about, you know, having to drink and use to feel any sort of comfort or ease inside where I live, in my guts, you know, where I live. You know, what you see on the outside is, you know, what I want to show you. You know, what happens, who I really am is what's on the inside. What is really going on inside of me. How comfortable am I? How do I behave when no one's looking? You know? I mean, that's really what the program is about. What am I going to do, you know, when my kids misbehave? Am I going to lose it, come undone, you know? Or am I going to, like, try and practice the principles that I've learned here, you know, try and carry, you know, try and treat my kids like newcomers. God, you know, when no one's looking, you know, because it's easy. Aren't we all spiritual here tonight? You know, it's like we're all gathered together and we're all walking on water and, you know, it's all nice, you know, it's cozy, you know. But when we're out there, in the world out there, I have to bring what I learn here out there. I got to. I have to. There's no doubt about it, you know. And really what I get here is tools for living. It's tools for living, you know. Like, I don't know about you, but when I get resentment, I don't get just a small little, oh, you know, I really didn't like that. You know, I get like seething resentments. You know, it's like growling in my guts, you know. And I'm planning to destroy you, you know. You know, I get little fantasies about, you know, the baseball bats and, you know, and you know, I'll give you an example, okay? I got to tell the story because it's so true for me, and it still continues to be true. I took my kid to school one day, and I didn't have money for lunch. I had a $20 bill, but I didn't have change to give him, so I stopped by a donut store, and I gave, some of you probably have heard this one, but I gave this lady a 20 and asked for change, and the lady said she didn't have the change, you know. So I just like came undone because I was in a rush. My kid had to be to school in 5 minutes, and I had to work, and, you know, and I'm splayed out all over the place, and I said, that's it. I will never, ever buy a donut in this store again. I want to tell you that I had never bought a donut in that store before. you know. But I made a pact, you know, that's it. You have lost my business forever. As a matter of fact, from now on, I'm not eating donuts, period, you know. And every time I would drive by that store, you know, the lady, you know, it's funny because I held on to that resentment for 4 years. 4 years! I'd drive by Sepulveda, and I'd say, there's your donut, I ain't coming in there, forget about it. I'd die before I eat one of your donuts. And, you know, the lady, of course, knew nothing about my resentment. She just probably, you know, when I walked out, she just thought, you know, another asshole. You know. I didn't have the change. She probably didn't have the change, you know. You know, but you see, she was doing it to me, you see, like me, you know. You're out to get me, you know. It's all about me. You're out to get me, you know, the victim, you know. And so I need a tool to deal with that kind of stuff. I don't know about you. And I just can't like, oh, well, I guess I'll forgive her, you know. It doesn't work for me. I need a process and some direction on how to go about the process of freeing myself from that resentment, you know. Because, you know, love is a very strong binding connection with another human being. But so is resentment. You know, so is resentment. And that resentment and that hatred and that anger and that rage actually really binds me to another human being, you know. So I needed to hear, how do I free myself from this? How do I stop, you know, this person from living rent-free in my head, you know, my head again, you know. And the solution was in the steps for me. And I had to like get into the steps, you know, clear away the wreckage of my past, you know, put down that big bag of resentments, you know, look at my responsibility in the situations that have occurred, go back and make amends to the people that I've harmed, you know. And that's like just an amazing deal for me to be given those tools, you know. And for 2 years on this program, I saw the tools. You laid them right at my feet. You read chapter 5 every meeting. And no, it's all right. I'm busy doing osmosis. You people are far out. I'll just hang out, you know. And it was only really from a sense of desperation, not virtue, that I picked up the tools. And thank God. And when I did, you know, I realized that, you know what? A lot of people around here are picking up these tools. And a lot of people are staying sober as a result of it, you know. And then, the miracle of all miracles, somebody asked me to go on a panel and to start sharing my experience, strength, and hope with another suffering alcoholic. And because the big book says, you know, obviously we can't transmit something we haven't got, you know. So if I haven't done the work myself, you know, how can I really transmit something to a guy that has, you know, a week or a month? You know, he's going to come up and he's going to say, you know, you've got a lot of time. Can you take me through the steps? Can you help me with the work around here? And how am I supposed to actually say, sure, kid? You know what I mean? If I haven't done the work myself, I'd be a fraud in Alcoholics Anonymous, you know? And I don't want to be a fraud in Alcoholics Anonymous. I want to do the work and then carry the message, you know? And I think it's a really important deal, you know, to do, you know, the meetings, the steps, and the service work. It's really absolutely imperative for me, you know. Recently going through the steps again, I really believe like more is revealed. There's no doubt about it. And just hang out. We hang out long enough, a lot of things come up, you know. And I need to actually run that by people, you know, because I really don't trust what this tells me all the time. I mean, it's a lot safer place to be in than it used to be. But there's still, you know, a lot of stuff going on in there, a lot of noise going on, a lot of chatter, you know. So I reality check, you know. And reality is an acquired taste for a guy like me. And I have to just reality check with people, like my sponsor. Just call them up and saying, hey, this is going on, you know. And, you know, you know, it's funny because I really have problems in relationships. I don't know about you guys, you know, but I do. And there are certain situations that I'll turn my will and my life over to the care of God in almost all areas of my life. But there are certain areas that I just keep up my sleeve. And it's almost like, it's a matter, I think, of trust. You know, of really, really getting to a place where we trust God, you know, in these other areas of my life. And sometimes I have difficulty with that, you know. And so what happens is I find myself continually I'm running the show, you know, when it comes to relationships and when it comes in some other areas as well. I mean, generally speaking, I can turn my will and my life over to God in, you know, all of these other areas. But there are certain things that still kind of get me, you know, where I still feel like I need to run the show, you know. And if I don't, then what's going to happen, you know? I mean, if I just kind of like turn it all over to God, you know, am I going to be like the hole in the donut, you know? Where am I going to go, you know? You know, the amazing thing is that, you know, when I came to Alcoholics Anonymous, you said, forget your thinking. You know, your thinking is stinking, okay? Your best thinking got you here, okay? Put that aside and just do what we ask you to do, okay? And later on, the thinking will come. Later on, the thinking will come, you know? I heard a story recently, and this is my first time ever saying it. I don't know if I can say it very well, but, you know, say we're all gathered on the shore of an ocean, and we look out and we see this island, and this island is serenity, and it's sobriety, and it's peace, and it's joy, and it's happiness, this island. And we have to get to that island somehow. And we look over on the side, and there's this huge ocean liner, very comfortable and you know, posh and beautiful, and, you know, and that ocean liner is called therapy, okay? And then over here, there's a group of goofy-looking people, and they appear to be in a rowboat, only we can't see the rowboat. And they appear to be rowing with oars, only we can't see the oars, right? So we're trying to make a decision where to go, and naturally, we choose the ocean liner. It's beautiful, it's comfortable, right? We need to get to that island. So we jump on the ocean liner. The ocean liner goes halfway across to the island and then turns around and comes back. And I say, hey, wait a minute, what's up with this? You know, we need to go to the island, and the captain of the ocean liner says, I'm sorry, if you really need to get to that island, you need to go see those goofy people over there, you know, in that invisible rowboat. So we get off the boat, and we go over there, and they see us, and they smile, and they welcome us, and they say, come on in. And we say, like, where are we going to go? We can't see any boat. Just get in anyway, they say, you know. And we get in the boat, and we sit down, they say, pick up the oars. And we say to them, what do you mean, what oars? We can't see any oars. They say, row anyway. Do it anyway. Pick them up and start rowing, you know. And the amazing thing is, after we start rowing for a while, we begin to see the boat, you know. We begin to see the boat. And then after a while, we see the oars, you know. And then we become so damn happy, we don't care if we ever get to the island, you know. God bless you all. Thank you so much for letting me be here tonight.
Sorry to interrupt your viewing. Taper Dave here. Just wanted to take a second to ask you to like and subscribe to my channel. Let me know if you like what you're listening. I've got some very good talks here, and this one's a great one. Just curious, do you think this is better than Zoom? Tell me what you think. Okay, this is how I prepare my drone for launching. I like to do it inside the cab of my truck so I'm not standing outside in the weather. To install the joysticks for control, up and down, right and left, powered on. I have an Android phone that I use to connect it to the drone with. And it's actually controlled through the iPhone, through an app. Oops, wrong way. It's actually controlled through the iPhone, or through this Android phone, through the app. It's actually controlled through the Android phone, through an app, and you connect it through this short connection right here.
Remote control connected.
Remote control's connected. So I pull out the drone. I have to extend the legs. Long legs extended first, then the short legs. Remove the gimbal protector. Set that aside, then power it on one short burst. in one long burst. I lay it down. So I have to go to calibrate. So the drone's not connected yet. It shows you here as this drone gets disconnected, even though the remote's powered on. So the drone has to establish it's connected. So I go into the app to calibration mode. First I'll calibrate the remote controller. Start calibration. Out, in, out, in, up, down, and then this little wheel is to control the gimbal. So it's calibrated. Go to gimbal calibration, start calibration, and then it calibrates the gimbal. If that shows up, the gimbal's moving all over the place. Changes, you can see it on the video. And I'm calibrated to take off. It's acquired 7 satellites at the moment. There are 26 satellites up in the sky, which it has to acquire before you can take off. So it's connected. It's got enough satellites. This is white. I can go to press this little arrow button, swipe right to take off, and it would start the motors if I slid this to the right. But I'll wait till I get outside. Don't want to do it inside.